The sun hung low over the rolling hills of Galilee, casting a golden glow across the dusty paths where people walked with heavy hearts. They came from everywhere, small villages, bustling towns, even far-off places like Jerusalem and Judea. Word had spread like wildfire about a man named Jesus, a teacher from Nazareth, whose words carried weight and whose hands brought healing. He wasn't like the others. He didn't demand power or wealth. Instead, he spoke of a kingdom of God that felt both impossibly distant and achingly close. The crowds followed him, drawn by stories of miracles, the blind seeing, the lame walking, the broken made whole. But it wasn't just miracles they sought. Deep down, they were hungry for something more: hope, truth, a way out of the darkness that weighed on their souls. On this day, the air was thick with anticipation. The crowds pressed in, their faces a mix of desperation and wonder. They were fishermen, farmers, families, some rich, most poor, all carrying the burdens of life under Roman rule. They had heard the ancient stories of a Messiah who had come to set things right. But could this man, this carpenter's son, really be the one? Jesus saw them, their pain, their questions, their longing, and he knew they needed more than miracles. They needed a new way to see the world, a new way to understand God's heart. So he turned away from the crowded villages and climbed a mountainside, his disciples trailing close behind, their eyes fixed on him. The people followed, some stumbling over rocky paths, others helping the weak to keep up. They weren't just chasing another healer. They wanted answers. Why was life so hard? What did God really want from them? When Jesus reached a quiet spot on the mountain, he sat down, a signal in their tradition that something important was coming. The crowd hushed, the wind whispering through the grass as the Sea of Galilee shimmered far below. They sat, waiting, their hearts open like dry ground craving rain. And then he spoke, his voice steady, warm, carrying a power that seemed to pierce the soul. What he said wasn't what they expected. It wasn't a battle cry against Rome or a promise of earthly riches. Instead, Jesus unveiled a vision of God's kingdom that turned everything upside down. He began with 8 blessings promises wrapped in hope that we now call the Beatitudes. Each one was a light in the darkness, a map to a life transformed by God's love. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, Jesus said, his words hanging in the air like a gentle breeze. The crowd stirred, confused. Blessed? The poor in spirit? In their world, blessings were for the powerful, the wealthy, the ones who had it all together. But Jesus wasn't talking about gold or status. He was talking about the heart, those who know they're empty without God, who come to him with nothing but their need. To be poor in spirit is to stand before God like a child, hands open, admitting you can't do it alone. It's the moment you realize your achievements, your wealth, your strength mean nothing without his grace. Think of Isaiah, trembling before God's glory, crying out, "I am a man of unclean lips." Or David, a king humbled by his own failures, pleading for a clean heart. Jesus was saying that this kind of humility, this raw, honest need for God, is the key to the kingdom. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. When you come to God broken, he doesn't turn you away. He opens the doors wide and says, "This kingdom is yours." In a world obsessed with self-reliance, Jesus' words were a lifeline. You don't have to have it all together to belong to God. Blessed are those who mourn. Then came the second blessing, just as surprising. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Mourning? A blessing? The crowd must have leaned in closer, trying to make sense of it. Mourning was for loss, for pain, for the things that broke your heart. But Jesus wasn't just talking about personal grief. He meant the deep sorrow you feel when you see the world's brokenness, when you ache for the injustice, the sin, the suffering all around you. It's the kind of mourning that Jeremiah felt, weeping for a people who had turned from God, or Jesus himself, tears streaming as he looked over Jerusalem, longing for them to know peace. This mourning isn't a dead end. It's a doorway to God's comfort. When you grieve over the world's pain or your own mistakes, you're not alone. God draws near, wrapping you in his presence like a warm embrace. The Bible promises that he's close to the brokenhearted, that he binds up their wounds. And there's a bigger promise here, to a day when every tear will be wiped away, when death and pain will be no more. Jesus was telling them, and us, that it's okay to feel the weight of the world's sorrow. Bring it to God, and he'll meet you there with a comfort that runs deeper than words. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Jesus continued. Meekness? In a world where power and ambition ruled, this sounded like weakness. But Jesus wasn't talking about being spineless. Meekness is strength held back, power wrapped in humility. Think of Moses standing before Pharaoh, leading a nation, yet called the meekest man on earth because he trusted God's plan over his own. Or Jesus himself, the Son of God, washing his disciples' feet, choosing love over force. The meek don't push their way to the top or trample others to get what they want. They trust God to lift them up in his time. And Jesus promised them something incredible, the earth itself. Not just a piece of land, but the fullness of God's kingdom, where the humble will reign with him. In a culture that shouts, look out for number one, Jesus says the meek, those who live with quiet strength and trust in God, are the ones who will truly win. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Next, Jesus said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Hunger and thirst aren't gentle feelings. They're raw, urgent, consuming. Jesus was talking about a longing so deep it drives you, a craving for God's justice, for his goodness to flood the world. It's the ache you feel when you see corruption, oppression, or sin winning the day. It's the cry of the psalmist, my soul thirsts for you, O God. This hunger isn't just a wish, it's a pursuit. It's chasing after God's way of doing things, even when the world tempts you with shortcuts. And Jesus promises that this longing won't go unanswered. When you seek God's righteousness, you find him the bread of life, the living water. Even now, he fills your soul with his presence. And one day, when his kingdom comes in full, you'll see a world where justice rolls like a river, where every wrong is made right. That's the satisfaction Jesus offers, a hope that doesn't fade. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy, Jesus said, his voice softening. Mercy is God's heartbeat, his compassion poured out on the undeserving. It's what Jesus showed when he healed outcasts, forgave sinners, and even prayed for those who nailed him to the cross. To be merciful is to see someone's pain or failure and choose kindness over judgment, forgiveness over revenge. The world doesn't always reward mercy. It's easier to hold grudges or demand justice. But Jesus says that when you show mercy, you reflect God's own heart. And here's the beautiful part. The mercy you give comes back to you. When you forgive, you open the door to God's forgiveness. When you show compassion, you find yourself wrapped in his. Mercy isn't weakness. It's the courage to love like God does, and it changes everything. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, Jesus declared. Purity of heart isn't about being perfect or following every rule. It's about having a heart that's fully God's. No hidden motives, no divided loyalties. It's what David prayed for. Create in me a clean heart, O God. The pure in heart seek God above everything else, letting him shape their thoughts, desires, and choices. This isn't easy in a world full of distractions. But Jesus promises something incredible. Those with pure hearts will see God, not just in heaven, but here and now in his presence, his voice, his guidance. To live with a pure heart is to walk so closely with God that you begin to see the world through his eyes. It's a life of clarity, purpose, and intimacy with the one who made you. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God, Jesus said, his words ringing with purpose. In a world torn by conflict, families divided, nations at war, peacemakers are rare. They don't just avoid fights. They step into the mess, seeking reconciliation, healing, and unity. Jesus, the Prince of Peace, came to mend what sin broke, and he calls us to join him. Being a peacemaker means forgiving when it's hard, listening when you'd rather argue, and working for justice that lifts everyone up. It's not about being quiet, it's about being brave. And Jesus says that peacemakers carry God's family resemblance. They're his children, reflecting his heart for a world made whole. In a culture that thrives on division, peacemakers shine like stars, pointing the way to God's kingdom. Blessed are those persecuted for righteousness. Finally, Jesus spoke words that must have felt heavy. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Persecution? A blessing? It's hard to hear, but Jesus knew what he was asking. Following him wouldn't always be easy. Standing for God's truth, his justice, his love, can bring rejection, ridicule, or worse. Jesus himself faced it, and so would his followers. But here's the hope. Persecution doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're faithful. When you stand for what's right, even when it costs you, you're walking with Jesus. And he promises that the kingdom of heaven belongs to you. In this life, you'll feel God's presence strengthening you. In the life to come, you'll share in his victory. It's a promise that anchors you, no matter what the world throws your way. A kingdom that changes everything. As Jesus' voice faded, the crowd sat in silence, his words sinking deep. The Beatitudes weren't just rules or ideals. They were a glimpse of a kingdom where the broken are blessed, where the humble are lifted high, where the hurting find hope. This wasn't the kingdom they'd expected, with armies and thrones. It was better a kingdom built on God's love, where the poor in spirit, the mourners, the meek, and the persecuted all have a place. Today, Jesus' words still call to us. They invite us to live differently, to let go of pride and embrace humility, to mourn with hope, to show mercy even when it's hard. They challenge us to hunger for God's justice, to seek peace in a divided world, to stand for what's right no matter the cost. And they promise that when we do, we're not alone. God is with us, filling us with his presence, his comfort, his strength. So take these words to heart. Let them shape you. Pray for a heart that's humble, merciful, and pure. Ask God to help you live out his kingdom here and now. The blessings he promises aren't just for Sunday. They're for today, for you, for anyone who dares to follow him. This is the Sermon on the Mount, a story of hope, a call to transformation, and a promise that God's kingdom is yours now and forever. If this message touched you, take a moment to pray. Ask God to make these truths real in your life. And if you're moved, share this story with someone who needs hope. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Let's keep this conversation going. God bless you.